We are people who love treasure. Doesn't matter how old or how young we are, we love little trinkets, things that we find unexpectedly, gifts that people give to us unexpectedly. It doesn't matter how insignificant or cheap the things are. If we think it's treasure, we want it. And if you doubt me, all you have to do is go to Mardi Gras and watch what people will do to get plastic beads and cups and worthless things. They bring them home in big bags and have no idea what to do with them or why they fought so hard to get them. Or just go to a basketball game and watch what happens when somebody brings out a t-shirt cannon. You'll see a 90-year-old woman elbowing a 10-year-old kid out of the way to get a worthless free t-shirt that's not even going to fit her. Why? Because we love treasure. And I think that's why we can relate to a couple of parables in Matthew 13, two very short parables about two people who find treasure. So let me read these to you. Matthew 13, verses 44 through 46, really brief stories. Jesus says this, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy goes out and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it." What Jesus is offering us here is a vision of the kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is like, in other words, what Jesus is saying, is this what it's like when we experience the power of God at work in the world? This is what it's like to be a part of it. And when we read those two parables about treasure, it's real easy to just focus on the joy. Both of these two, the merchant and the farmhand, found great joy when they discovered the treasure. But sometimes when we read parables, it's easy to settle for what's easy and on the surface. But I think parables push us to explore something deeper, something much more explosive, something that is transformative for us. So these two parables on the surface could be about joy, and that would be enough. But I think there's something more for us hidden in these parables about treasure. At the end of each of the parables, here's what we find. The farmhand finds a treasure in a field, then he kind of has this dubious work to buy the field, not letting people know that there's treasure, but it says, and sells all that he has and buys the field. Then there's the merchant who finds this one singular pearl of great value, and it says this, and he sold all that he had and bought it. Think about that for just a second. It's not just that they had joy in what they found, but they traded their entire life that they knew for the treasure they discovered. For the farmhand and the merchant, we don't know where they slept, what they wore, or how they ate. Everything that they had was gone in order to get the new treasure. And maybe if we're really willing to kind of sit in these parables for just a little bit, maybe the invitation to the kingdom is to set aside an old way of life. To hear the invitation to the kingdom as a way of life that calls us to move beyond what we've known, what we've done, how we've lived. Here's what I think. So many of us are bored with life. We've achieved what we think we want to achieve. We've got the job we want to get. We know what we have. And yet there's still something within us that calls for something more. What we want is the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus says, if you want the full presence of God, then maybe what it takes for us is to set down, to lay down our old way of life. Mark Batterson, in one of his books, All In, he writes this, in order to begin a new chapter, you must end an old chapter. One of our fundamental spiritual problems is this. We want God to do something new while we keep on doing the same old thing. So maybe as you think about these two parables, it's time to ask, what do you really desire out of life? And what's the old thing that you need to lay down in order to receive the new thing in the kingdom? Maybe it's a toxic relationship. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe it's just a sense of anger that you feel towards someone that you've held on to for a long time because it feels good to be angry at them. Maybe it's a dream that you had of a life that this is what life has to be. And you've been pursuing that and working towards that for a long time. But maybe it's time to lay down that dream so that you can receive life. Or maybe you've been working hard at a job, and all the while you've been pushing back this calling that God's laid on your life, what you're called to do. And maybe it's time. Maybe it's time to make the hard decision to lay down that job to step into what God would have you do. At the church in Hattiesburg, there's a man one Sunday wandered into church, and it was easy to see that he was in distress. One of our church members saw him and knew exactly what was going on. Because his own son had been an addict, he understood that the man visiting our church was detoxing. He was coming off a high, so he went and sat with the man and talked with him, helped him out, helped him find a place to begin recovery, walked with him in that journey. Eventually, this man who said he simply came to our church because it was the closest church and he knew there had to be more to life, he came forward for baptism one Sunday. And here's what he did. He got baptized, and then he went down the aisle, fist bumping people down the aisle in this real stodgy Methodist church. But everybody in the room understood what had happened. He had laid down his old life to receive the treasure of the kingdom. He changed people's lives because of that day. And maybe you want what he found. Maybe it's time for you to lay something down so that you can receive the joy of the treasure of the kingdom.